Welcome to our unit test course, and let's talk about writing unit tests in JavaScript. So the first thing we have here is our code base for um, this unit test. Currently, there's a starter pack for it of this existing code which explain it. So I'm going to give us a walkthrough um, through it. So this is just a repository pattern code, right? This is the repository. Okay, there's no repository for now. Okay, but we'll focus more on the service layer. Okay, so we have the service to create users, which validates. We have two functions here. One is to validate, create our users, and to find user by email. We can add more functions, but the point is to teach us how to write unit tests, how to mock and spy on functions, and how to create more test coverage over time. So the first thing we need to do is to install our npm package. So say npm init flag y means yes. So we have an npm package install. And the next thing we're going to install is our package JSON. So the next thing we're going to install is our Jest. So while installing our Jest, then we'll work on our script command because we need two commands. We need one for the basic Jest and we need one for coverage. So this is Jest and this one is Jest coverage. So if I say npm run test, it runs npm Jest, and if I say npm run test coverage, it runs the coverage on our test application. So while it's installing, let's go do a peek into our services. So we're going to write in the unit test for these two functions, create users and find user mail, and I'll be using this to explain mocking and other concepts that involves writing a unit test for your application. So now we have this installed. So we'll come over to our user service.test.ts, because this is where everything is going to be happening. So I'm going to split it right because I want us to be able to compare and contrast what we see on our screen. And I'm going to close this window so that we can have more view. So now if I say npm run, so let's run our script npm run, right? npm run test. So of course you get a command, you get a failed test. It said your suite must at least contain one test. So a test can just be as simple as this: expect 1 plus 1 to be equal to 2. All right, so let's run the test again. Okay, so the reason why it's not working is because we have to put it inside test suite. So tests add two numbers, then we'll create a callback function. So say expect 1 plus 1 to be 2. Okay, there we go. I believe it should work now. Yeah, so see, we have this now. So what's the difference between test and test coverage? Now, I've written this test, but I don't know if this test is sufficient enough for my own system, my own code, my old code. So we really need to know if this is sufficient for our old code. And the only way you need to do that is when you run a test coverage. So I remember we've already stored it in our package JSON as what npm run test coverage. Sorry about that. Here we go. So see, it gives us more clarity on how many lines have been covered in our code. Right now, we have 0 lines have been covered, 0 statements have been made, 0 branch, 0 functions, 0 lines, and uncovered lines. So it means that we've not even started writing any unit test for our code. So the higher your percentage for your coverage, you see that in percentage, the higher your percentage for your coverage, the more indication it shows that there are more lines of code being covered. So I just want to get it out there about coverage. So let's write a unit test. So we're going to start from find users by email. We want to write a unit test for this simple function here. Find the user by email in our user service. So first of all, to start, we're going to write a describe block, right? So this describe block, it gives you, is where you explain what your service is all about. Your service, your what about your test block, right? So describe, then you put your test. What am I testing for? I want to test for what? Find user by email. Okay, that's what I'm testing for in this describe in this service. So, right. So now there are three things you do whenever you want to write a unit test. First of all, you act. There are three A's. You arrange, you act, and you assert. So this is what we call the three A's in testing. So first of all, when you look at this function, it has a format. First of all, you check it accepts, it takes two arguments, user repo and user email. That's the first step. The next step, it checks if that email is a valid email. And the next thing, it acts. It checks if it runs a repository request, right, to check if this it runs a function on that email, right, which is user repo or find by email. So currently now we don't know what our user repo is in our test, and we don't know what our user email is. So I'll just create a mock stuff. So this is the arrangement: const mock user repo is equal to, let's just say, an empty object for now. Then const, so we'll call the variable for user email is equal to user email, which is equal to, let's say, unit test 01 at gmail.com. That's the user's email. So we've arranged it. So act is when we were using the actual, trying to run the actual service. So for us to be able to run the actual service, we're running what? User service. Find by user email is found in what? User service. So we import const user service is equal to require slash src slash services slash user service. All right. So we put our sync here because it's going to be, it's an asynchronous function. Find user by email. Now, remember, find user by email accepts what? Two arguments. So imagine we don't have an existing arrangement here. We cannot act next. So pass in our arrangement, which is what? User repo in this case is what? Mock user repo. And email is what? User email. Okay, let me bring this way. All right, so we are set. So what I'll do is this: I'll just say const results. I will assign to a variable. So I want to assert the results. So what do I expect? So I expect results to be defined. I just put it that way. Things. Now, for a unit test to be possible, you have to do three things. You have to test for three things: the happy parts, what can go wrong, and if the test is readable using AAA. So now we've done the AAA, and now we're going to test for happy part. Happy part means what happens if the code runs successfully, and error cases is what happens if there's an error. So you have to your test can't just focus on what goes right. You are selling hope, you are not selling results, right? So you want to focus on writing a test that covers for both positive and negative case scenario. So let's write a test just to, so we're going to do for a positive scenario. We want this result to be defined. We want to get a successful response if a user email is unittest@gmail.com. So if I run my test coverage, so what happened, right? What happened here is that we have a failed test because we'll get this error. User repo.find by email is not a function. Now remember that user repo was passed in as an argument, and user repo, which is now our mock user repo here, what we have here is that our mock user repo has a function called find by email, but here it's an empty object when we mock it. So in trying to mock this, right, we're going to mock the find user by email, right? And to mock, right, you just say find user by email, then you assign it to jest dot fn. Just of fn means jest dot function. So if I run my test again, I'll still fail, but now we have a new error. So okay, no, wait, okay. Oh, sorry, not find. So I was smoking find user by email. We are talking about find by email. So pardon me, find by email. Right. So let's run our test again. So this is what we have here. So you see that our results is supposed to be defined, but we are having undefined. Why? Because find by email, yes, has been mocked. So, but when you're running this stuff, was it a successful? So we're testing for if the user email was being found. So we're going to create what we call uh, a mock behavior here. So we say mock user repo dot find by email dot mock resolve an object. So it should return an object which is true. We can say mock resolve an object. You can say object. You can say true, right? You can even say false. We'll get there when we're doing a negative testing, right? False. So we're doing false to check for what if the user did not pass the right email. But let me not go ahead of myself. So we'll come back here. So when you mock this find by email, it should return an ID, it should return the email, which is this user email, and a password, but just so. And when we do this now, we'll see that our test coverage is going to pass. So we have 100%. Sorry, I said 100%. Our test case pass because why? The result is defined because when the user imputed unit test at gmail.com, when it was being imputed, the next thing user report find by email mocked, gave us what that email response, and we'll be able to get what a successful response. So but now if you notice line 26 was not tested for, and our covered line tells us that. So we're going to write our test if user, we're going to test for um if user mail is empty. So we'll test write a unit test. So this is a negative test. So we've done for happy parts testing. So let's test for errors. So now let's test for our error parts. Error part is when you're testing for a negative case scenario. You want to test for this. And we have a negative case scenario. If an email is not provided, you should throw an error. Email is required. So what I do is test find user by email, missing email. So we'll mock our repository and we'll say our user email is null. We can say null. We can say user email should be an empty string. Acts and assets. So now this is where it happens. So to throw for an asynchronous method, let me close my function first. Now to throw for an asynchronous function, what we'll do is this: we say const results. So we don't need to say await because we're trying to throw for an error. So that's the rule in unit test. So await user service sorry, I said await. We're not awaiting. So we are going to throw await user service, find user by email, mock repository, right? So we've talked about one assertion at the beginning, which is what at the beginning, expect results. We've talked about one assertion at the beginning, expect results to be defined. Now we're talking about another assertion, which is to throw for an error. So I will say expect results dot widgets to throw email is required. So let me clear my console and run for this test. So you see, we have two test case written and two tests passed, right? So, and if you notice, we've been able to cover all the lines. So the uncovered lines in our code is just line 5 to line 20. So from line 5 to line 20, we're going to write a unit test for that to cover for line 5 to line 20. So let's quickly just do that to write a unit test to cover from line 5 to line 20. So if we've already written one to describe for user service find by email, so I'm just going to do for create user. So let me bring to the top. So we have create user. Okay. So this is our create user function. We want to write a test for our create user function. And okay, so we're going to test for API parts. We're going to test for um, API parts. We're going to test for this EPA function. Validated user is an EPA function. We're going to test for it. We're going to spy on this validate user function, and so that we can be able to get more concepts on mocking and spying. So the first thing I want to do, right? So I want to spy on validate users. So let's test for validate users, and so let's test for the process to create a user successfully. So let's test for a process to create a user successfully. So following the API part, so that's our API part. We want to test for a user success. So I'm going to say tests create user success. Okay, so we have async. So right, so do we have any, so our user repo which was passed in, we need to create a mock for that too. So say const mock user repo. So you have to mock anything, any database, anything that's in that service, any repository pattern, you have to mock it. If not, your test is not going to run. So mock user repo. So we have two methods under this. So we had at the in our previous function here, we only had find by email, but now we had find by email and we have save. So use mock user repo find by email and save. So we have these two things here, find by email, and we have user repo dot save. Okay, so we've been able to mock that first of all. Later we can decide to predict whatever value we want to get out of it. So validate user. So since we're working on validate user, we have to import validate user, comes validate user here. Then so to spy, we say just.mock src validate user. You have to bring it in. So I can now say validate user dot mock return value. So this is a very simple way to just mock a function that was located in that file. Because the validate user was imported into the application. So we're going to perform that same process. We import it, we create a mock out of the directory, which is src, and we'll mock it to be true. Okay. So what's the next thing we're checking for? So create user. So first of all, create user. We need to create our user data, right? So Remember, what we are doing right now is the arrange process. So we have mocked, we validate. Let's create our user data. User data is equal to so say email. So let's say, so if you look at our service here, we have three things. When we're creating our user, we have email, we have password, and created that. So password and created that. So created is going to just be our new date. Okay, so that's our user data. So the next thing we say, we what after you arrange your acts. So const results. I like writing mine like this. So await user service dot create user brackets mock user repo and user data. So let's say expect. So we've only talked about our session. I don't want to go too far. So say expect results to be defined. So let's run our unit tests for this guy. So let's take a look of what we've written so far. Create user will mock, will validate our helper function here, user data, and yeah. So when I run my test coverage, okay, we have a field test. So to be defined, we got undefined, and we need to know why. So should I remove these awaits? Let's test that. So yeah, so the reason is whenever you are running, you don't need to put in the await in front of the function. So you don't need to put that. That await is risky. It can make you fail a test. So I took away that, and we see that we had a full coverage for our user service except what line 10. So we're going to just do a negative test for line 10 before we can write more assertion cases. Okay. why organizations take unit tests very seriously. Now, most unit tests hire quality testers and security experts, DevOps engineer. And what these people, this team work with is they ensure that every test case in your application is passed and the coverage is at a agreed standard. So some organization might say they want 80% total coverage maximum for all for the code base. Some organization can say they want 100 or 95%. So right, so the task is now the engineers write the unit test to ensure an 100% coverage. So let's say developer A worked with the company from year one to year three, and that developer wrote a unit test with much coverage. And now we want to improve our services. We want to improve a service. So let's say we want to improve a service on. So let's come to user service. Sorry, let's come to user service. Let's say we want to improve a service. So we want um, user.find by email should not just find by email. Okay, so let's pick a very realistic example. So find user by email, right? So now we're going to let's add a new criteria that the email must include at. So let's say email must include at. So if email, so let's say we want to change this to okay, fine. If email, so let's say the company decides to improve their code, say if email dot includes, so, or let's say we want to check some for some, let's say we don't want our emails to have underscore. So any email that have underscore, it should tell them this new error. Okay, so now we've written a unit test, right? But we've changed one of our functions. So this will change this case scenario. So let's run a test coverage. So you can see that it's even breaking. It's breaking. So let's try it again because it's an array. So it's an array, sorry. Dot splits. Okay, I think it should work. Let's see. So we're still having an error. So you see our code is breaking. So our test is telling us when you run the test, it's already telling you that this code we are writing is a bad code. So it means that if someone is trying to introduce a wrong code into your system and you run and this code is being pushed to a live branch because there's a test case that runs automatically whenever you push your code. It detects this and you have to go fix this stuff and it helps protect your system from bad code. So this is a perfect example of why it's important to write unit tests so that if someone is introducing a bad code into the system, your system can flag it and a security breach is already activated and it has to be resolved before the code can be merged to the existing code. Thus, you're having a seamless application. So I just said I should put this out there. So we have 87.5% coverage for our code, which is really nice and good to go. All right, so but we need to talk about something very important. We're going to talk about tests life cycles, testing life cycles. Um, so if you look at our test case, I'm going to take it back a bit. If you look at our test, this for createUser, we were repeating code. We were really repeating code. So we repeat for this test, this, repeat mock user repo, this. So for every time we run the code, we will always want to mock user repo every time. We want to mock user repo every time, and every time. So instead of you to do this, we can just take it out and make it global for everyone to be able to access. So I can say cons this, right? I take it here is equal to this, and I don't need any mock user repo again because our arrangement is going to be here. Okay, so it's outside our test, but it should be inside the describe block. So I take this away. I don't need you. Same for this guy and this guy. So let's see if when we run our unit test is going to pass. So let's run our unit test now. So we've brought it outside here. So we have just one instance of it. And we run. So we have failed test. Are you saying that mock user repo is not defined? Mock user repo is not defined. Why? Okay, we did not use it for our second guy. So we can still use it here for this guy. So yeah, so remember I said it has to be inside describe block. So we have to describe block. So we have to put it here too. All right. So let's go. So it's going to pass. Yeah. But sometimes when you're writing your test cases, your mock behavior can differ across different test life cycles. So maybe for instance, your mock user repo can have email and save, and at some point you want the structure is going to change. Okay. So that's where we use things like before each. So we'll talk about before each. Talk about before each, before all, after each, and after all. So these are what defines our test cycle. Before each is what is those things you want, those arrangements you want to make before you start writing, before you start running each of the tests. Because when you run the test, it runs each of them. So before each of them, what do we want to do? We can say, okay, fine. We want to reset all our mock. So we want to clear all our mocks before we start each test. So let's try this before each clear all mocks. Let's see what happens. So you see, you can do that. You can say, okay, before each, so this clear all mocks. And this is very, very important. I think this is one major thing you use before each. It's very important. So in case maybe for instance, you mocked a value inside let's say we are mocking inside here, right? I want to use that same mock in another file but on separate instance. What you need to do is you have to clear that mock and write another mock. So we have before each. We can then before all means that before you run all the tests, it's just a one time running, so you are doing it just once. Before, what actions do you want to take before you run all? Okay, so yeah, so these are just, yeah, but majorly you use this to clean up mocks in your application. That's one perfect instance I've seen so far when you use it. Then after each, what do you want to do after each and after all? So it's something that is very straightforward, and you can just um look at it, because I just want to touch everything that's important here. But the most important ones you use is before each and after. They're all important. But these three you use them more: before each, and after all. Before all can be very risky to your application if you don't know how to use it. But it takes a certain level of experience for you to be able to use it. Okay, thank you. Other assertion types, examples. Let's talk about other assertion examples in writing our unit test. So we have to be defined, and just the way we have to be defined, we can have to be undefined. So let me just create a false narrative. So I can do something like this. So let me create a false narrative. Let us say expect an empty string to be undefined. So or I can say expect not results to be undefined. So we can say expect not result to be undefined. So the next we have here is to be. This is used for when you're performing numeric calculations, perfect example, expect 1 plus 1 to be 2. Then maybe you want to check for a negative test, expect 1 plus 1 to not be equal to 3. We have equal to sign, we have greater than, we have less than. 2 for plus 5 to be equal 7, um 3 to be greater than 2, 2 to be less than 3. Okay, then we have to have been called times. So how many times was this called? And this is used for spies and mocks. So when you mock things in your test, you want to check how many times it was called. So in our example, validate user was called 1 time. If we run our test, we'll definitely see that it was called 1 time. So let's say I want to run it. Let me say I'm running it twice. Let's see if it's going to work. So this is 2. So it's going to run 2 times. So let's see what happens. Okay. So it counted it at 1. So but there are times that you will want to, maybe you are running it through a loop, right? It's going to tell you the number of times you want it to be called. Anyway, so that's what to have been called times means. Then when you try to test for a negative test, like this example here, right? You want to check for an error, and a function that throws an error in an asynchronous function. Rejects and resolves are so important when you want to throw a response or when you want to return an actual value of an asynchronous function. So expect.reject dot to throw is for error, while expect.resolve dot whatever thing you want to call it, maybe to be defined, to equal, to be greater than, is it depends on what is coming out as your output. That's what you are expected to use for your resolve. Then of course we have the to throw assertion method. So to throw, this is when you are throwing for a synchronous. So to throw is for synchronous functions. Dot resolves dot to throw is for asynchronous function. Reject dot to throw rather. Dot reject dot to throw is for asynchronous functions. Why dot resolve also is to get the right response from an asynchronous functions. There are other examples that you can also check out to be able to get more assertion method. But with this, you are good to go, and it helps you to be able to write assertions and make you have good coverage for your unit test. Thank you, and this is what you need to know about assertion. Thank you.